we're going to go back to talking about that Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability. There is one announced 2025 53786 that is affecting Exchange Server 2016, 19, and Subscription Edition if you have it in a hybrid deployment, basically on-prem instances of Exchange. This vulnerability will allow privilege escalation to Microsoft Cloud through compromised on-premises access. As mentioned, about 29,000 servers are still known to be vulnerable, primarily in the US, secondarily in Germany and Russia. That's based on some scans by shadow servers, so thank you for that research. CISA has released a mandatory patching requirement for federal agencies. The due date or deadline, which was the 11th, we're recording this on Wednesday the 13th. So likely there's still a significant portion of folks that of those 29,000 plus that still need to install that hotfix. It was made available in April. And mitigates the issue by transitioning hybrid identity configurations to and advises migrating to online Exchange. Experts at Microsoft are warning that leaving that unpatched could be an open invitation, although at present, at time of writing of this article, there was not a known exploit of the vulnerability. That CVE is a CVSS 8. There's a couple of resources that we will link to, but as always, we'll mention mitigations, apply that April hotfix for legacy or unsupported servers, disconnect them, and continue to assess and remediate your cloud configurations with some of that guidance that's available and that we will link. We've had a number of stories, not specific to Exchange, but where there's a critical fix that's been released and months or longer later, there's a significant install base that hasn't had it in place. We can wag our finger as much as we want, but instead, let's talk about like why you would still want to be running an on-prem Exchange server. And, if this is a good timely reminder to move to something cloud-based that's going to get more regularly pushed patches.
Yeah, it's wild that there's 29,000 Exchange servers still publicly accessible. Like, not that they're vulnerable, just 29,000 of them. Microsoft keeps doing a lot of things to sell 365, and this is another one. Like, if you don't need it, get rid of it.
And Jake, I know you have some thoughts on why folks may still need it, that we do want to point out that, risk profiles differ. You may still have a reason that this is the most viable option for your environment. But at the very least, it's worth reviewing those requirements and whether it applies. So what are some examples, Jake, where folks may still be best served by having that on-prem option?
Yeah, in my previous job, there were some customers that we had a hard time moving over to M365, mostly because that discussion revolved around like compliance. And that's not to say that you can't make Microsoft 365 compliant. You definitely can, and there's certainly enough like use cases and people doing that where it is compliant for their needs. But it kind of got into that discussion of like what are your compliance needs? And like sometimes the people we were talking to, they either just got confused or they didn't know what it meant to like have control over your data, and they considered like anything being in Microsoft 365 as like out of their control. Of course, there's like plenty of controls you could put in M365 and configure it in a way that it's like safe and secure and like follows your compliance best practices. But that was a big discussion. And like from my experience, what I heard a lot of people saying is like, well, I want the data here. I want it to be managed by me. I want like my own stuff controlling it. I don't want to rely on Microsoft. And that's like some of the points I've heard too is like, if Microsoft 365 goes down or something, like you're reliant on Microsoft like engineers to fix that issue. So it's kind of like your own, each company is different and what works for each company is different as well. So as long as you're like having that conversation around like, is on-prem Microsoft 3 or is on-prem Exchange like the right solution for us, and whatever like conversation you're having, you keep on coming to like, yes, then maybe it is. I feel like even if Microsoft killed Exchange tomorrow, just like outright, like bricked every instance, there would still be like a need, and there would still be like a gap that somebody else would come in and fill with some other product. So I don't think we're ever going to get rid of like on-prem stuff. But yeah, like M365 is also not without its own flaws. Like I just said, they've had their own outages that have taken forever. And there's also some cloud-specific attacks that are engineered towards Microsoft 365. And more famously, there was a 2023 breach where the threat group Storm 0558 got the Microsoft signing key, and were able to basically make their own, like generate their own authentication keys using that key. And that's something that on-prem Exchange servers wouldn't really be like affected by, but a cloud instance like M365 would. So I'm not saying it's everybody should move to M365 or everybody should stay on-prem. It's really a discussion you need to have. As long as you're having that discussion and making those, like understanding where your risk is for your company and like what you're doing to protect your on-prem, like at least those conversations are happening. That's the success and thing that like I would want to focus on.
Yeah, and I think I'd also add that one key factor is how much can you limit that external exposure of your server? The harder it is to find on the internet, the better. And this affects your cyber insurance. It affects your overall security profile. These are key things that become risk points. And so the more that you can do as an organization to be like, okay, does it need to be publicly accessible? How many layers can we make it before someone can get in and see this? The better off you become.
I was just peeking at that same shadow server data in relation to the big vulnerability from 2021, and there's still like 1,300 servers that are unpatched with that 2021 vulnerability too. So it's a case where if you really need it, you've got to invest in the resources to handle the updates. Yeah, because those are 1,300 compromised Exchange servers at this point.
Yeah, at those 1,300, those are just like the ones that people aren't listening to podcasts like this. Those servers are unmanaged. Like there's maybe a handful that are managed that just can't get the point across that they want to move. They should move to M365 or those discussions aren't happening. But it's like crazy to me to imagine that like in the time that you've had to apply those patches, you can't find even an in-band patch cycle to include critical stuff like this. So those servers are just going unmanaged, or like people are just not caring about those.
Yeah.
The poor, unmanaged, forgotten Exchange servers.
Abandoned, unloved. So I think TLDR there, headlines or vulnerabilities like this, it's a good checkpoint to consider if your strategy is accounting for if a rapid patch is needed. It's a good opportunity to look at, is this on-prem model still serving us? And at the very least, these are good opportunities. I feel like we say it every time. To model scenarios that you may want to use for a tabletop exercise, or make sure that you have a documented plan around responding to if something similar were to happen.